The diner's bell jangled, sharp and desperate, slicing through the hum of early morning chatter. Ellie Harper froze mid-pour, coffee splashing onto the counter. Her heart lurched, not from the spill, but from the woman who just walked in. Claire Montgomery. Again. Third time this week. Ellie's breath caught, a shaky exhale fogging the air. She's back. Claire, all sharp cheekbones and tailored confidence, slid into the cracked red vinyl booth by the window. Her navy blazer screamed money, but her eyes, storm gray restless, betrayed something raw. Ellie wiped her hands on her apron, the faint smell of grease and syrup clinging to her fingers. She was 28, stuck in this nowhere diner in Portland, Oregon, serving truckers and dreamers who never tipped enough. Claire, 35, was a tech CEO, the kind of woman who owned penthouses and private jets. Worlds apart. Yet here she was, staring at Ellie like she was the only person in the room. "Morning, Claire," Ellie called, voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. She grabbed the coffee pot, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. The diner smelled of burnt toast and hope, the kind that lingered in the cracks of the counter. Claire's lips curved, a half-smile that hit Ellie like a punch. "Morning, Ellie." Claire's voice was low like velvet, but there was a crack in it today. Something heavy. Ellie noticed the faint shadows under her eyes, the way her fingers drummed the table, nervous, not polished. "Usual?" Ellie asked, pouring coffee into Claire's mug. Their fingers brushed as Claire reached for the sugar, and Ellie swore the air sparked. She pulled back, heart hammering. Get it together. She's just a customer. But Claire wasn't. Not anymore. Not since that rainy night 2 weeks ago when she'd stayed past closing, helping Ellie stack chairs while the radio played soft jazz. They really talked about broken dreams and the weight of expectations. Ellie had confessed she'd wanted to be a painter once, before life got in the way. Claire had admitted she hated her gilded cage, the boardrooms, the loneliness. That night under the flickering neon sign, Claire had looked at Ellie's smile and whispered, "You make this place feel like home." Now Claire's gaze lingered too long and Ellie felt it. A pull, dangerous and undeniable. But there was a problem. A big one. Claire was married. To a man. A senator, no less. The kind of guy whose face was plastered on campaign posters across the city. Ellie had seen the ring, the headlines, the perfect power couple photos. Yet Claire kept coming back, her smile softer, her visits longer. "Rough night?" Ellie asked, leaning against the counter, trying to keep it light. The clatter of plates and the hiss of the grill filled the silence. Claire sighed, a sound like wind through broken glass. "You could say that." She stirred her coffee, the spoon clinking too loud. "Ellie, do you ever feel trapped?" Ellie's throat tightened. She knew trapped. Bills piling up, her mom's hospital debt, the paintbrushes gathering dust in her tiny apartment. But Claire? She had everything. Didn't she? "Sometimes," Ellie admitted, voice soft. "But I keep moving. No choice." Claire's eyes locked on hers, intense, searching. What if you had a choice? Would you run? The question hung heavy, like the steam rising from the coffee. Ellie's pulse raced. She wanted to say yes, to grab Claire's hand and bolt from this greasy spoon into a life where they could be what? Together? The thought was reckless, impossible. Claire was married. Straight. Untouchable. Before Ellie could answer, the bell jangled again. A man in a crisp suit strode in, his presence sucking the air from the room. Senator Daniel Montgomery, Claire's husband. Ellie's stomach dropped. His smile was all teeth, polished for cameras, but his eyes were cold, scanning the diner like he owned it. "Claire," he said, voice clipped. "We need to talk." Ellie stepped back, gripping the coffee pot like a lifeline. Claire's face shuddered, her warmth gone. "Of course, Daniel," she said, standing. But as she passed Ellie, her fingers grazed Ellie's wrist, a fleeting touch that burned. Ellie watched them leave, the senator's hand on Claire's back, possessive. The diner felt colder, the buzz of voices duller. She wiped the counter, the rag catching on a crack. She's just a customer, she told herself. But her heart screamed something else entirely. Ellie's hand shook as she scrubbed the counter, the scent of bleach stinging her nose. The diner was quieter now, the lunch rush fading into the hum of a lazy afternoon. But her mind was loud, replaying Claire's touch, the senator's icy stare. She glanced at the clock, 2:17 p.m. 3 hours until her shift ended. 3 hours until she could escape to her cramped apartment and pretend her heart wasn't breaking. The bell jangled and Ellie's head snapped up, hoping, dreading. But it was just Marla, the diner's cook, hauling in a crate of onions. "You okay, kid?" Marla asked, her voice rough from years of smoking. "Look like you seen a ghost." "I'm fine," Ellie lied, forcing a smile. Marla raised an eyebrow but didn't push. She never did. Ellie was grateful for that. She didn't want to explain the ache in her chest, the way Claire's gray eyes haunted her. She busied herself refilling ketchup bottles, the sticky tang clinging to her fingers. But her thoughts drifted to last night's dream. Claire, standing in her paint-splattered studio, laughing as Ellie smeared blue across her cheek. A fantasy stupid and impossible. Claire was a comet, blazing through Ellie's orbit before vanishing. Ellie was just here. Always here. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. A text from her mom. Hospital bill due Friday. $2,300. Ellie's stomach twisted. She made $12 an hour, tips included. The math didn't add up. She shoved the phone back, her breath hitching. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, mocking her. The door swung open again and there she was, Claire. Alone this time. Her blazer was gone, replaced by a soft cream sweater that made her look less like a CEO, and more like someone Ellie could reach out and touch. But the shadows under her eyes were deeper, her shoulders tense. "Ellie," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. She slid into the same booth, her fingers twisting the edge of a napkin. "Can we talk?" Ellie's heart thudded. "I'm working," she said, glancing at the counter. Marla was watching, her eyes sharp. But Claire's gaze was a tether pulling Ellie closer. "Please," Claire said, and the crack in her voice was a knife to Ellie's resolve. Ellie grabbed a rag and moved to Claire's booth, pretending to wipe it down. "What's wrong?" she asked, keeping her voice low. The diner smelled of coffee and fried onions, but all Ellie could focus on was Claire's perfume. Something expensive like jasmine and regret. "I left him," Claire said, the words tumbling out like they'd been caged too long. "Daniel. This morning. I can't keep pretending." Ellie froze, the rag limp in her hand. "Pretending what?" Her voice was barely a breath, afraid of the answer. Claire's eyes met hers, raw and unguarded. "That I don't feel this." She gestured between them, her hand trembling. "That I don't come here every day just to see you smile." The world tilted. Ellie's knees felt weak, the clatter of the diner fading to a dull roar. She wanted to laugh, to cry, to grab Claire and run. But reality was a cold slap. "Claire, you're married. You're you. I'm nobody." "You're not nobody," Claire snapped, her voice fierce. "You're the only real thing in my life." Ellie's throat burned. She glanced around. Marla was busy, the other customers distracted. "You don't know what you're saying," she whispered. "You have a life. A husband. A company. I'm just a waitress." Claire cut in, her eyes flashing. Don't do that. You're more than this place, Ellie. You're everything." The words hit like a tidal wave. Ellie gripped the edge of the table, her nails digging into the wood. She wanted to believe it, wanted to fall into Claire's orbit and never leave. But the senator's face flashed in her mind. His power, his reach. "What happens now?" she asked, voice shaking. "He's not gonna let you go." Claire's jaw tightened. "He doesn't own me." But her voice wavered, and Ellie saw the fear in her eyes. Daniel Montgomery wasn't just a man. He was a machine, built on control and ambition. Leaving him wasn't just personal, it was war. The bell jangled again and Ellie's heart sank. A woman in a sharp suit stood in the doorway, her eyes locked on Claire. Miss Montgomery, she said, voice clipped. We need you at the office. Now. Claire's face hardened. I'll be there, she said, but her eyes stayed on Ellie, a silent promise. As she stood, she slipped a folded napkin into Ellie's hand. Read it later, she whispered, then walked out, the woman trailing her like a shadow. Ellie unfolded the napkin in the back room, her hands trembling. In Claire's neat script, meet me tonight. 8 p.m. The pier. I'm done hiding. The pier smelled of salt and freedom, the ocean's roar drowning out the chaos in Ellie's head. She stood at the edge, her sneakers scuffing the weathered boards, the cool night air biting her cheeks. It was 7:58 p.m., and her heart was a drum, each beat louder than the last. The napkin was still in her pocket. Claire's words burned into her mind. I'm done hiding. Ellie pulled her jacket tighter, the faint scent of diner grease clinging to her despite the shower she'd taken. Her dark hair whipped in the wind, and she tucked a strand behind her ear, scanning the horizon. Portland's skyline glittered in the distance, a reminder of Claire's world. Glass towers, boardrooms, a life Ellie could barely imagine. Yet here she was waiting, her breath hitching with every passing second. Headlights sliced through the dusk, and Ellie's stomach flipped. Claire's sleek black car pulled up, and she stepped out, her silhouette sharp against the fading light. No blazer tonight. Just jeans, a soft sweater, and those gray eyes that made Ellie's knees weak. Claire's steps were quick, purposeful, her boots clicking on the pier. You came, Claire said, her voice a mix of relief and disbelief. She stopped a foot away, close enough for Ellie to catch the faint jasmine of her perfume. You asked, Ellie said, trying to sound casual, but her voice cracked. The waves crashed below, a rhythmic pulse that matched her racing heart. What's this about, Claire? Claire stepped closer, her breath visible in the chilly air. I meant what I said. I left him. For good. Her voice was steady, but her hand shook as she reached for Ellie's. I've spent years pretending, Ellie. For him, for the world. But you make me want to be real. Ellie's chest tightened, a mix of hope and fear. Claire's hands were warm, grounding, but the weight of her words was heavy. You don't know what you're giving up, Ellie said, her voice low. Your life, your company, everything. For what? Me. For us, Claire corrected, her grip tightening. I've never felt this alive, Ellie. Not in boardrooms, not at galas. Only here with you. The words were a spark, igniting something reckless in Ellie. She wanted to pull Claire close, to kiss her under the stars and forget the world. But the senator's face loomed in her mind, his cold eyes, his power. What about Daniel? She asked, her voice barely above the waves. He's not gonna let you walk away. Claire's jaw clenched, a flash of defiance in her eyes. He doesn't get a say anymore. I filed for divorce this morning. It's done. Ellie's breath caught. Divorce. The word was a cannon blast, shaking the fragile hope she'd been clinging to. Claire, he's a senator. He's got money, lawyers, people. He'll destroy you. And me. Claire's eyes softened, but her voice was fierce. Let him try. I'm not afraid of him anymore. I'm afraid of losing you. The confession hit Ellie like a wave, pulling her under. She stepped closer, their faces inches apart, the salt air thick between them. I'm scared, Ellie admitted, her voice raw. I'm nobody, Claire. I can't fight your battles. You're not nobody, Claire whispered, her hand cupping Ellie's cheek. Her touch was electric, soft but sure. You're my reason to fight. Ellie's resolve cracked. She leaned in, their lips brushing. Just a moment, tentative, like testing the edge of a cliff. The kiss was brief, but it burned, tasting of salt and promise. Ellie pulled back, her heart pounding, the ocean's roar filling the silence. But then lights. Harsh, blinding. A car screeched to a stop at the pier's entrance, and Ellie's stomach dropped. Daniel. His tall frame emerged, flanked by two men in suits. His voice cut through the night, sharp as a blade. Claire, get in the car. Now. Claire stiffened, her hand still on Ellie's cheek. No, she said, loud enough for the wind to carry. I'm done, Daniel. His laugh was cold, venomous. You think you can just walk away? From me? From everything. He stepped closer, his eyes flicking to Ellie with disgust. And for her? A waitress. Ellie's fists clenched, anger flaring. Say that again, she spat, stepping forward. Claire grabbed her arm, pulling her back. Ellie, don't, Claire whispered, but her eyes were locked on Daniel, burning with defiance. You're making a mistake, Daniel said, his voice low, dangerous. You'll regret this, Claire. And so will she. He turned and walked back to the car, his men following. The engine roared and they were gone, leaving only the sound of waves and Ellie's ragged breathing. Claire turned to her, eyes wide with fear and resolve. We need to go, she said. Somewhere safe. Ellie nodded, her heart a storm. She didn't know what was coming, but she knew one thing. She wasn't letting Claire go. Ellie's apartment was a shoebox, the kind of place where the walls seemed to lean in, whispering failure. The faint smell of paint and instant coffee clung to the air, and a single bulb flickered above the sagging couch. Claire sat there now, her knees pulled up, looking out of place in her soft sweater against the chipped paint and second-hand furniture. Ellie paced, her sneakers scuffing the worn floorboards, the memory of Daniel's threat echoing like a drum. You okay? Ellie asked, her voice rough. She stopped by the window, peering through the blinds. The street below was quiet, but her nerves were electric, waiting for headlights, for trouble. Claire's laugh was brittle, like glass cracking. No. But I'm here. She looked up, her gray eyes catching the dim light. With you. Ellie's chest ached. She wanted to cross the room, to hold Claire until the world stopped spinning. But fear kept her rooted. He's gonna come for you, she said, her voice low. You know that, right? Claire nodded, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. He's already started. My phone's been blowing up, lawyers, board members, his people. They're circling like vultures. She paused, her breath hitching. But I don't care. Not anymore. Ellie turned, leaning against the wall, the plaster cool against her back. You should care. He's got power, Claire. He can ruin you. And me. Her voice cracked on the last word, betraying the fear she'd been swallowing. Claire stood, crossing the room in 3 quick steps. She stopped inches from Ellie, close enough for Ellie to feel the warmth of her, to catch that jasmine scent. He can try, Claire said, her voice fierce. But he doesn't get to decide who I love. The word love hung heavy, a spark in the dim room. Ellie's breath caught, her heart stuttering. You don't know what you're saying, she whispered. But her hands were already reaching, fingers brushing Claire's. I know exactly what I'm saying, Claire said, stepping closer, their foreheads almost touching. I've spent my life running from this, Ellie. From who I am. I'm done. Ellie's resolve shattered. She pulled Claire in, their lips meeting in a kiss that was all heat and desperation. It wasn't gentle like the pier. It was a storm, raw and hungry, the kind that could break you apart. Claire's hands tangled in Ellie's hair, and Ellie tasted salt, not sure if it was tears or the ocean still clinging to them. They broke apart, gasping, the room too small for the weight of it all. Ellie's hands trembled as she cupped Claire's face. What are we doing? She whispered, her voice raw. This is crazy. Claire's laugh was soft, shaky. Maybe. But it's ours. A sharp knock on the door made them both freeze. Ellie's heart lurched, her eyes darting to the window. No headlights, but the sound was a warning. Stay here, she whispered, grabbing a baseball bat from under the couch. Her pulse pounded as she crept to the door, peering through the peephole. It was Marla, her face grim under the hallway's flickering light. Ellie opened the door, bat still in hand. What's wrong? She asked, voice low. Marla's eyes flicked to Claire, then back to Ellie. You're in deep, kid. Word's out. Senator's people are sniffing around the diner, asking about you. They know you're tied up with her. Ellie's stomach dropped. What did you tell them? Nothing, Marla said, her voice gruff. But they're not stupid. You two need to lay low. Fast. Claire stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. Thank you, Marla. We'll figure it out. Marla snorted, handing Ellie a crumpled envelope. Tips from today. Use it to get out of town for a bit. And Ellie. She paused, her eyes softening. Be careful. She's worth it, but this ain't a fairy tale. Marla left, her footsteps fading down the hall. Ellie locked the door, her hands shaking as she opened the envelope. $100, maybe less. Not enough to run far. She looked at Claire, who was watching her with those gray eyes, full of fire and fear. We can't stay here, Ellie said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. He'll find us. Claire nodded, grabbing her phone. I've got a place. A cabin up in the mountains. No one knows about it, not even Daniel. She hesitated, her voice softening. Come with me, Ellie. Please. Ellie's throat tightened. She thought of her mom, the bills, the life she'd been scraping by in. But then she looked at Claire, really looked, and saw a future she'd never dared dream of. Okay, she said, the word a leap. Let's go. They packed light, Ellie shoving clothes and her old sketchbook into a backpack. As they slipped out into the night, the city's hum felt like a warning. Ellie gripped Claire's hand, the warmth of it her only anchor. The road ahead was dark, but for the first time, Ellie wasn't running alone. The mountain road twisted like a snake, the headlights of Claire's car slicing through the dark. Ellie gripped the passenger seat, her knuckles white, the hum of the engine blending with the thud of her heart. Pine trees loomed outside, their shadows dancing in the moonlight. The air smelled of damp earth and freedom, but fear clung to Ellie like damp clothes. She glanced at Claire, whose jaw was set, hands steady on the wheel despite the storm in her eyes. How far? Ellie asked, her voice cutting through the silence. The dashboard clock read 1:32 a.m. They'd been driving for hours, Portland's lights long gone. Another hour, Claire said, her voice tight. The cabin's off the grid. No Wi-Fi, no cell service. Safe. Ellie nodded, but safe felt like a lie. Daniel's face flashed in her mind. His cold smile, the way he'd looked at her like she was nothing. She shifted, her backpack digging into her hip. Inside was her sketchbook, the one thing she'd grabbed besides clothes. A piece of her old dreams before the diner, before Claire. You're quiet, Claire said, glancing over. Her voice softened, like she was reaching for Ellie across the distance. Talk to me. Ellie's throat tightened. Just thinking about what happens next. What we're running from. What we're running to. She paused, the words heavy. This can't end well, Claire. Not with him. Claire's hands tightened on the wheel, the leather creaking. I know it's messy, but I'd rather face his mess than live a lie. She looked at Ellie, her gray eyes fierce in the dim light. You're worth it, Ellie. You're worth everything. Ellie's chest ached, a mix of warmth and terror. She reached over, her hand resting on Claire's thigh. The contact was grounding, real, like the only thing keeping her from falling apart. You're crazy, she said, a shaky laugh escaping. You know that, right? Claire's lips twitched, a ghost of a smile. Maybe. But you're here, so what does that make you? Ellie didn't answer, just squeezed Claire's thigh, the warmth of her seeping through the denim. The road stretched on endless, the stars above sharp as knives. For a moment it was just them, two women, two hearts racing toward something neither could name. The cabin was small, tucked into a clearing surrounded by towering pines. The air was crisp, scented with sap and wood smoke. Claire unlocked the door, the hinges creaking, revealing a cozy space with a stone fireplace and worn furniture. Ellie dropped her backpack, her sneakers scuffing the hardwood. This yours? She asked, taking in the simplicity, a stark contrast to Claire's city life. My dad's, Claire said, lighting a lantern. The glow cast shadows on her face, softening the edges of her worry. He left it to me. Only place I ever felt free. Ellie nodded, understanding. She wandered to a shelf, spotting a faded photo of a younger Claire, laughing with an older man by a lake. You look happy here, she said, her voice soft. Claire joined her, her shoulder brushing Ellie's. I want to be again. With you. The words were a spark, reigniting the heat between them. Ellie turned, their faces close, the lantern's light flickering in Claire's eyes. They kissed, slow at first, then desperate, hands roaming, breaths mingling. The world outside, the senator, the threats, the chaos, faded. It was just them, the crackle of the fire Claire lit, the taste of her lips, the feel of her skin. They sank onto the couch, the springs creaking, their bodies pressed close. Ellie's fingers traced the curve of Claire's jaw, her heart pounding so loud she swore Claire could hear it. I'm scared, Ellie whispered, her lips brushing Claire's ear. But I don't want to stop. Then don't, Claire murmured, her hands sliding under Ellie's shirt, warm against her skin. They moved together, a dance of need and trust, the cabin their only witness. Hours later, they lay tangled in a blanket, the fire down to embers. Ellie's head rested on Claire's chest, the steady thump of her heartbeat a lullaby. But peace was fleeting. A distant crunch of gravel made Ellie tense, her eyes snapping to the window. Headlights. Claire, she whispered, sitting up. Someone's here. Claire's face paled, but her voice was steady. Get dressed. Stay behind me. Ellie scrambled for her clothes, her pulse racing. The headlights grew brighter, the engines growled closer. She grabbed her sketchbook, clutching it like a shield. Claire stood by the door, her stance fierce, ready to face whatever was coming. Ellie's heart screamed one truth. She'd fight for Claire, no matter the cost. The cabin's door rattled under a sharp knock, each thud a hammer to Ellie's chest. Claire stood rigid, her hand on the knob, her eyes flicking to Ellie. Stay back, she whispered, her voice low but firm. Ellie nodded, gripping her sketchbook, its edges digging into her palms. The fire's embers cast a faint glow, the air thick with the scent of pine and fear. Claire opened the door a crack, the cold night air rushing in. A man stood outside, his suit sharp even in the dark, his face half hidden by shadow. Not Daniel, but one of his. Ellie's stomach twisted. Miss Montgomery, he said, voice smooth as oil. The senator requests your presence. Immediately. Claire's jaw tightened. Tell him I'm done, she said, her tone ice cold. He doesn't own me. The man's smile was thin, predatory. You misunderstand. This isn't a request. He stepped forward and Ellie's heart lurched. She moved closer, ready to shove him back, but Claire held up a hand, stopping her. I'm not going, Claire said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Leave. Now. The man's eyes flicked to Ellie, sizing her up. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Both of you. He reached into his jacket and Ellie's breath caught, expecting a weapon. Instead, he pulled out an envelope. Legal documents. The senator's offering a settlement. Sign, and this ends quietly. Claire's laugh was sharp, bitter. Quietly? He sent you to my father's cabin in the middle of the night. That's not quiet. She took the envelope, tearing it open. Her eyes scanned the pages and her face paled. He's threatening to tank my company. My life's work. Ellie stepped forward, her voice shaking but fierce. Let him try. You're more than his games, Claire. She grabbed Claire's hand, squeezing hard. The man's gaze hardened, but Ellie didn't care. She wasn't invisible anymore. The man stepped back, his smile gone. You have until tomorrow, 8 a.m. The senator doesn't wait. He turned, his footsteps crunching on the gravel as he disappeared into the dark. The headlights faded, leaving only the sound of the wind and Ellie's ragged breathing. Claire slammed the door, her hands trembling as she leaned against it. He's not bluffing, she said, her voice breaking. He'll destroy everything, my company, my reputation. And he'll come for you, Ellie. Ellie's chest tightened, but she pulled Claire close, wrapping her arms around her. Then we fight, she said, her voice fierce. Together. Claire's eyes were wet, but she nodded, clinging to Ellie like a lifeline. They sank onto the couch, the papers scattered on the floor. Ellie's fingers traced Claire's cheek, wiping away a tear. "What's in the papers?" she asked, dreading the answer. "An ultimatum," Claire said, her voice hollow. "Sign away my shares in the company, agree to a public reconciliation, or he leaks everything. My emails, my search history. Proof I'm—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "Proof I'm in love with you." Ellie's heart stopped, then surged. Love. The word was a wildfire, burning away her fear. "Let him," she said, her voice steady. "I'm not ashamed of you. Of us." Claire's laugh was shaky, but her eyes softened. "You're braver than me," she whispered, leaning into Ellie's touch. They kissed, soft and slow, the world outside forgotten for a moment. The fire's last embers crackled, the cabin a fragile bubble around them. But morning came too fast. The sun crept through the curtains, casting long shadows. Claire's phone, useless in the mountains, lay silent, but Ellie knew the clock was ticking. They made coffee, the bitter scent grounding them as they sat at the rickety table, the papers between them. "We need a plan," Ellie said, her voice firm. "He's got power, but so do you. You built that company, Claire. You've got people who'd back you." Claire nodded, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "Maybe. But Daniel's got the press, the lawyers. I need evidence, something to hit him back with." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "There's a file. On my work server. Emails between Daniel and his campaign manager. Proof he's been siphoning funds. If I can get it." Ellie's pulse quickened. "Then we get it. But how? You said no Wi-Fi." Claire's smile was grim. "There's a town 20 miles out. Internet cafe. We go, I log in, we download the file. Then we fight." Ellie nodded, her heart a drum. "Okay. Let's do it." She grabbed her sketchbook, flipping to a blank page. "But first, I need to do something." She sketched quickly, her pencil scratching, capturing Claire's face, the fire in her eyes, the curve of her smile. "For luck," Ellie said, tearing out the page and handing it to Claire. Claire's eyes welled up as she took it, her fingers brushing Ellie's. "I love you," she said, the words a vow. Ellie's throat burned. "I love you too." They left the cabin, the morning air sharp, the road ahead uncertain. But Ellie felt it, a spark of fight. They weren't running anymore. The internet cafe in the tiny mountain town smelled of stale coffee and desperation. Ellie sat at a corner table, her hoodie pulled low, watching Claire hunch over a clunky desktop. The keyboard clacked under Claire's fingers, each tap a rebellion. Outside, the morning was gray, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Ellie's sketchbook lay open on her lap, Claire's portrait staring up at her. A reminder of what they were fighting for. "Almost there," Claire muttered, her eyes locked on the screen. The cafe was nearly empty, just a bored teenager behind the counter and an old man reading a newspaper. But Ellie's nerves were taut, her eyes darting to the door every time it creaked. Daniel's reach was long, and they were exposed here, raw like an open wound. "Got it," Claire said, her voice a sharp whisper. She plugged in a USB drive, the screen flashing as files downloaded. Emails, bank records. Enough to bury him. Her hands shook, but her eyes were fierce, a storm brewing. Ellie leaned closer, the faint scent of Claire's jasmine perfume grounding her. "How bad is it?" she asked, her voice low. Claire's jaw tightened. "Campaign fraud. Offshore accounts. He's been skimming for years. If this gets out, he's done." She ejected the USB, slipping it into her pocket. "But we need to move fast. His people are probably tracking my logins." Ellie's stomach twisted. "Then let's go. Now." She grabbed her sketchbook, shoving it into her backpack. The cafe's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a mocking hum. As they stood, the door swung open and Ellie's heart stopped. Two men in suits, their eyes scanning the room like hawks. Daniel's men. "Claire," Ellie hissed, grabbing her arm. "Back door. Now." Claire nodded, her face pale but resolute. They slipped through the cafe, dodging tables, the teenager barely glancing up from his phone. The back door led to an alley, the air damp and thick with the smell of garbage and rain. They ran, their footsteps slapping the wet pavement, Claire's hand tight in Ellie's. The alley opened to a side street, their car parked a block away. But as they rounded the corner, headlights flared, blinding them. A black SUV screeched to a stop, blocking their path. Daniel stepped out, his face a mask of fury, his suit pristine despite the drizzle. "You're making this ugly, Claire," he said, his voice low, venomous. "Give me the drive." Ellie stepped in front of Claire, her fists clenched. "Back off," she snapped, her voice shaking but fierce. The rain stung her face, mixing with the sweat on her brow. Daniel's eyes flicked to her, cold and dismissive. "Stay out of this, Waitress. You're out of your league." Claire pushed past Ellie, her voice like steel. "She's more than you'll ever be, Daniel. You're done controlling me." She held up the USB, her hand steady. "This ends you, not us." Daniel's laugh was sharp, a blade in the rain. "You think you can ruin me? I own this city. You're nothing without me." He stepped closer, his men flanking him, their hands hovering near their jackets. Ellie's heart pounded, but she didn't back down. She grabbed Claire's hand, squeezing hard. "We're not nothing," she said, her voice raw. "And you're not untouchable." The standoff stretched, the rain drumming on the pavement, the air electric with tension. Then Claire moved fast, tossing the USB to Ellie. "Run," she whispered, her eyes locked on Daniel. Ellie hesitated, her heart screaming to stay, but Claire's gaze was a command. She bolted, the drive clutched tight, her sneakers slipping on the wet ground. Behind her she heard Daniel shout, the scuffle of footsteps. She didn't look back, her lungs burning as she sprinted toward the car. She reached it, fumbling with the keys, her hands slick with rain. The engine roared to life just as Claire appeared, running, her sweater soaked. She dove into the passenger seat, gasping. "Go!" Ellie floored it, the tires squealing as they peeled out. In the rearview she saw Daniel's men chasing, but the SUV was slower, stuck in the narrow street. Claire's hand found hers, trembling but warm. "You okay?" Ellie asked, her voice ragged. Claire nodded, her breath hitching. "We've got it. We've got him." They drove into the night, the rain a curtain around them. Ellie's heart was a storm, but Claire's hand in hers was an anchor. They had the evidence, but the fight was far from over. Daniel wouldn't stop, not until he was broken. And Ellie knew deep in her bones she'd fight to her last breath to keep Claire safe. The safe house was a friend's apartment in Seattle, a cramped loft with a view of the Puget Sound. The air smelled of damp wood and takeout, the faint hum of the city seeping through the walls. Ellie sat on the floor, her back against the couch, the USB drive on the coffee table like a ticking bomb. Claire paced, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice sharp as she spoke to her lawyer. "Yes, send it anonymously. Every major outlet. Now." Ellie's hands trembled as she flipped through her sketchbook, landing on Claire's portrait. The pencil lines captured her fire, her vulnerability. It felt like a lifetime ago, that moment in the cabin when hope had felt possible. Now every creak of the floorboards made her jump, every shadow a threat. Daniel was out there, his empire crumbling but his claws still sharp. Claire hung up, her face pale but resolute. She sank onto the floor next to Ellie, her shoulder brushing hers. "It's done," she said, her voice soft but heavy. "The emails are out. The press has everything, his fraud, his lies. He's finished." Ellie's throat tightened. "And you? Your company?" Claire's laugh was bitter. "It's a mess. The board's panicking, investors are pulling out. But I don't care." She turned, her gray eyes locking on Ellie's. "I'd burn it all down for you." Ellie's heart ached, a mix of love and fear. She reached for Claire's hand, their fingers intertwining. "You don't have to burn anything," she said, her voice steady. "We'll rebuild. Together." Claire's eyes welled up, but she smiled. A real smile, the kind that had first caught Ellie in the diner. They kissed slow and deep, the world outside fading. The loft's radiator hissed, the sound grounding them in this fragile moment. But peace was short-lived. Ellie's phone buzzed, a text from Marla. "Cops at the diner. Asking for you. Lay low." Ellie's stomach dropped. She showed Claire, whose face hardened. "He's not done," Claire said, her voice low. "He'll try to pin something on us." Ellie nodded, her mind racing. "Then we go public first. Tell our story. Not his version, ours." She hesitated, her voice softening. "You ready for that? For everyone to know?" Claire's hand tightened on hers. "I've been hiding my whole life. I'm ready." They worked fast, using Claire's laptop to draft a statement. Ellie's hands shook as she typed, her words raw but honest. "We're two women who found each other in a world that tried to keep us apart. We're not perfect, but we're real. And we won't let fear win." Claire added her own, detailing Daniel's threats, her decision to leave. They posted it to Claire's social media. The words a flare in the dark. The response was instant. Notifications flooded in, support, hate, everything in between. Ellie's heart pounded, but Claire's hand in hers was steady. They watched the news break online, headlines screaming, "Senator's fraud exposed. Wife leaves for Waitress." The world was watching, and for once Ellie didn't feel invisible. Days later they sat in a new diner, this one in Seattle, the air thick with the smell of pancakes and hope. Daniel was under investigation, his campaign in ruins. Claire's company was shaky, but she was fighting for it, her fire back. Ellie had started painting again, her canvases full of color and courage. "You okay?" Claire asked, her voice soft as she sipped her coffee. Her hand rested on Ellie's, their fingers laced. Ellie smiled, the kind that felt like sunlight. "Yeah. For the first time I think I am." She leaned across the table, kissing Claire softly, the clatter of dishes a familiar song. The road ahead was uncertain, bills, battles, a world that didn't always understand. But they had each other, and that was enough. As they left the diner, the bell jangling behind them, Ellie glanced at Claire, her heart full. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a fighter, a lover, a dreamer. And Claire, her smile, her strength, was the spark that had changed everything. They stepped into the morning hand in hand, ready for whatever came.